Hey, statists, we've got some questions for you.
And boy, do I have some answers for you.
If a kid couldn't afford lunch because the school bullies kept taking a percentage of his allowance, you wouldn't blame the kid's parents for not giving him enough. So why is it that when people struggle financially, you blame the employer who provides them with money and not the government which is taxing them?
Because if you were paid a cookie and I taxed you a crumb, even without the taxes, you would still not have enough for dinner. That being said, this is the worst false equivalency I have ever heard in my life. I mean, think about it. Both my parents work for the government and I get free lunch and transportation at school. So literally, the bully would be giving me my food, giving the parents my money, and driving me to school after all. I mean, come on. And the bully would only take 20%.
For fans of democracy, I would ask, is it okay to forcibly rob, control, or otherwise victimize somebody as long as the majority approves of it?
No, that's why we have a representative democracy instead of a direct one, you dunce.
We all know that every economic system has market failures. Capitalism, socialism, communism, whatever. But my question is, why do you feel morally justified in forcing other people to subsidize these failures? Why should I be forced to subsidize failed electric car companies like Fisker or failed government initiatives like Obamacare? Shouldn't I have the right to decide what risk I want to take with my own money?
It's only a failure if you give up. If you keep trying, then it's just a setback. Einstein took 100 tries to get the light bulb correctly. And with your personal money, yes. But with your tax money, then no. It's all dependent on the politician.
Of the left, who are always talking about how government's going to help the poor and demarginalize marginalized groups. I don't understand this. From the ancient world through the Middle Ages all the way up to modern times, governments have largely conspired against the poor. I'm thinking in particular a century ago with eugenics programs and segregation programs and zoning programs, business regulation and union rules. Everything was designed to exclude, marginalize, and impoverish groups that didn't have power. Governments are always controlled by rich people. That's just the way it works. Why do you think the government is the right means to help the poor? It makes no sense to me.
If you was a homeless person and you seen another person who was tattered and looked dirty talk about how they can help you find housing or they can give you money, you would look at them like they lost their marbles. That's the simple premise. I mean, if you was a starving person, I'm talking about bones pointing out of your stomach starving, and you seen a fat person or a morbidly obese person, you would probably run towards that person because you would think they would have food. It's just simple supply and demand sense.
How can you claim on one hand to be anti-guns, yet on the other hand, you want the state to take guns away at gunpoint? Pew pew.
The same way I can say that I'm anti-locking your girlfriend in the basement because she says she doesn't love you anymore, but I'm pro-police custody. The government should have certain ineligible privileges that citizens do not have.
Government has slaughtered 250 million of its own people in acts of democide. How can you trust such a beast to rule over you? And as some of you argue for, to be disarmed to.
By that logic, why trust children with their parents or even go to hospitals? Several hundreds of millions of people died with their parents around.
Disarmed to.
Why is it that no matter how much money the government takes from its citizens, it's always broke?
Because governments usually give more to their citizens than they take. Next question.
If keeping 100% of someone else's income is slavery, then at what percentage is it no longer slavery?
1, if they're getting paid, then it never was slavery. 2, I live with my parents and I only made about $400 every 2 weeks. They kept 100% of my check. I wouldn't call that slavery when I was 17.
Can a bunch of people who don't have the right to do a certain thing grant to somebody else the right to do it? And if not, How did Congress acquire the right to do things that you and I don't have the right to do?
To answer your first question, yes, me and my wife could give you custody of my kid so you can take care of it. And the whole Congress question, well, it's mostly through war and an already established nation.
Why are you comfortable spending borrowed money knowing your children will have to pay it off down the line? You're increasing their eventual taxes before they can even vote. Isn't that the definition of taxation without representation?
No, it's a definition of inheriting the family house.
If people are so f***ing greedy and selfish that we need governments to steal from the rich and give to the poor and needy, then why do over 1.5 million charities exist globally, with $373 billion f***ing being raised in 2015 alone? And that's not including the Clinton Foundation's money laundering operation. Alleged money laundering operation.
373 billion seems impressive only to people who doesn't realize that the government spends over $668 billion on welfare. That's more than all the charities in the world make combined. That's almost twice the amount. And also, charity donations is too unreliable for the poor.
You do realize that making something illegal won't make it go away. Guns, drugs, the black market will provide.
You do realize making sexual assault illegal won't make it go away. Pills, drugs, all these things this guy who I'm about to jump in his taxi will provide.
Here's some of the money government wasted. The government spent $1.4 million on an app that just simply points left and right for the TSA. That should have been done for way cheaper.
Or better yet, never done at all.
Oh, that's not crazy enough for you? How about this? The government wasted $1.4 trillion on a jet that doesn't even work. That's enough to buy every homeless person in the United States a mansion. A $600,000 home.
All right, he made two claims here. He said that that's enough to buy somebody a mansion. The average mansion runs about $2 million. And if you multiply like the lowest amount you could find for the homeless, that's 554,000 people. So multiply 2 million by 554,000, that's 1.8 trillion. A little over 400 billion you're missing. But then I guess he corrected himself and said $600,000, which wouldn't buy you a mansion, but it would buy you a good sizable house, but only for about a few months because you wouldn't have the money to afford the taxes on it. So you would probably have a person in a house for about 1 month or two.
Oh, that's not crazy enough for you. The government lost $6 trillion. Knowing all of this, do you still think the government can spend your money more wisely than you can?
My personal money, no, but my tax money, sure, why not? I can't spend $6 trillion and still survive in this world.
How can you rationalize basic philosophical concepts such as non-aggression principle as being quote-unquote too difficult for society to be educated on and abide by, yet believe that hundreds of thousands of pages of federal and state regulations, clauses, case files, and amendments are somehow easier?
Because most of these regulations I will not come across because I don't own a business. But if you call my grandmother a slut, you can have these hands.
If it's wrong for you to do a certain thing, can you, by voting, make it right for someone else to do the exact same thing?
Why, yes, that's how democracy works. I think it's wrong for me to get married personally at this point in my life. But if somebody want to practice, let's say, the religion Islam and get married to 4 broads, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
If the competitive market ingenuity of capitalism can deliver us things like iPhones, 3D printers, and private spaceships, why should services as important as justice, roads, and defense be monopolized by the state?
Because lynching, vigilantism, and mob mentality is a fucking bad idea?
Right-wing statists. When you're opposing gun laws, you argue the government shouldn't be so powerful that it can disarm the populace. So why, when it comes to drug laws, do you argue the government should be so powerful that it can tell people what they can put into their own bodies?
Because the Second Amendment doesn't say your cousin Jeff can give you meth.
Now, to statists of the right, claim you're opposed to socialism and don't see government as the answer, and yet invariably you're celebrating the cops, the first responders, and the fire departments, and the jails, war, all big public sector programs. It's a kind of the socialism that you love. Why do you think that that's going to work better than the private sector?
Because the private sector doesn't incentivize people running and burning buildings to save a poor person's baby.
If people are innately good, what is the need for government? And if people are innately evil, what is to stop them using government to cause evil to one another? And would it not be better that their influence be limited to that which they can achieve voluntarily, rather than to give them the added benefit of legitimised force?
People aren't innately good or bad. People are innately unpredictable because of free will. That's why we need government as a constant, reliable source to balance the people's natural good and bad tendencies.
Left-wing statists. When you're opposing drug laws, especially weed, you argue the government shouldn't be so powerful that it can tell people what they can and can't put into their own bodies. So why, when it comes to gun laws, do you think the government should be so powerful that it can have a complete monopoly over effective force?
Because a bullet has a more effective kill streak than ecstasy?
Here are the things you can't do without government permission. Build a house, drive a car, own a gun, go fishing, collect rainwater, hunt, cross the road, get married, leave the country, start a business, fly on a commercial plane, take drugs, work. It's actually hard to think of something that doesn't require government permission. Knowing this, how can you say you're free?
Here are the things you can do without government permission. Fall in love, have kids, stretch your legs, cough. Knowing this, how can you say you're not free?
If being a democratically elected constitutional republic creates legitimate political authority, does that mean that all the things that were done by the democratically elected constitutional republics of the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and North Korea, all those things were legitimate and justified?
Most of the main atrocities done by these various countries happen when they stop having elections, so no.
If you're a proud, government-loving liberal who champions personal choice, could you please explain why I can't choose to not fund the murder of innocent children abroad?
You either didn't vote or your candidate lost in the election.
You really want the same people who run the DMV to be in charge of your health care?
Wow, I didn't know DMV people were doctors too. Well, most of the DMV are women, and affirmative action and grants are very powerful, so I'm not shocked.
Why is it that you prefer anti-discrimination laws which force those who hate other races to hide that prejudice and make money off of those other races, to a system where they could be open about said prejudice and lose money?
If I had a car accident and I have to be rushed to a hospital and the only hospital around is a white hospital, I will die. So I don't really care about the money that much.
You guys often say that libertarians have too much faith in the goodness of people. Why then do you, in the same breath, argue that I give up my right to bear arms and entrust my personal safety to police in gun-free zones? That seems like pretty strong faith in human nature to me.
No, it's proper trusting and standards and procedures of people practicing their particular career. It's like saying you have human faith in doctors.
Status, since the war on drugs has been an absolute failure, what makes you think a war on guns would be any different?
No, it's more of a battle on guns since you can't grow your Glock with your petunias.
Can you morally justify the federal government preventing a small territory from seceding from a larger country?
Why, yes. Let's say the small territory is New York. New York brings in probably trillions of dollars to the U.S. So if it succeeds, then it would probably affect most, if not all, of the poor in the United States.
How is me writing down "I'm in charge" and then getting 20 friends to sign it any different from the drafting of the Constitution?
Because you didn't fight the British for the liberation of your people and land, I guess.
If roads are so complicated and magical that they can only be built by governments, then why do they hire private companies to actually build the eh? My fucking roads!
Look, when private companies start making national interstate highways that span across several states, then I'll be impressed. I mean, this is such a horrible, horrible question. It's like a 4-year-old asking, if being a parent is so hard, then how come parents hire nannies to watch over me for 40 minutes?
Why is every logical explanation we provide about how something will work just pure speculation, while any doomsday scenario you pull out of your ass about anarchism is absolute truth?
Well, anarchy as a system have never been tried, and our doomsday speculations have never failed or never existed, so both seem logical in the realm of fantasy.
Now, to the status of the left and right, who are constantly against free trade and promoting protectionism and warlike foreign trade policies, why is it that you think trade between nation states is any different from trade between states in the U.S., between Vermont and New Hampshire or Georgia and Mississippi, which we understand is a good thing because it broadens the division of labor and makes everybody better off? Why do you not see that that's also true internationally? And why do you think a solution to this non-problem is to raise taxes on the American people?
Because if my job moves to Arizona and I'm in California, I could easily relocate. But if my job moves to China, where they're paying them rice, I'm fucked.
How highly do you think of yourself that you think it's your right to impose your views on people you've never met and tell them it's good for them?
Very. Next question.
Given my first question to right-wingers and my second to left-wingers, comparing drug rights, which half of you advocate, and gun rights, which the other half of you advocate, it seems to me that there are two possible compromises. Either we go full authoritarian and none of you get what you want, or we go full libertarian and you can both have what you want. Which sounds more appealing to you?
That's because you think very black and white, while the world needs you to think gray. The alcohol is blinding you of your retardation.
You keep saying I have to be moral by voting for a lesser evil this year. Could you please explain how any kind of evil is ever moral?
Well, sometimes the world have to give you a bad situation and you have to choose the lesser of which one will hurt you least. A crazed psycho want to clip off your, how could I say this, toenails or clip off your nose. You're going to give them the toenails.
If you've ever said there ought to be a law, or if you believe that government is the best solution to most of life's problems, I have one question for you. Are you prepared to kill? Every law, no matter how big or small it appears to be, is backed by violent force and, in many cases, death.
If they give me a gun and a little bit of military training, then hell yeah.
When an individual's moral conscience conflicts with the commands and rules of lawmakers and law enforcers, is an individual morally obligated to do what they believe to be wrong simply to obey the law?
Well, it depends on which religion you are in, but if you're a Christian, yes, Paul the Apostle preached that you have to follow the law of the land.
Listen to this ridiculousness. We protect our president with guns, but our children with paper gun-free zone signs. Congress has a 9% approval rating. Government can't even balance a budget. We are about to reach a $20 trillion debt. Social Security and Medicare and other socialist policies are unsustainable. The drug war kills more people than drugs itself. How can you say government is effective?
Well, I think that government is effective on some issues, but need improvement on others. But I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater by destroying all forms of government. I think that that would cause more chaos and destruction in the world.
A major question that I have for proponents of state economic regulations in particular is how exactly can you sleep at night knowing the economic destruction that you have created? The effect of government regulations on output has been calculated to have an accumulated reduction cost on the American GDP of nearly $40 trillion just since 1949. In other words, absent of any federal economic regulations, after World War II, we could have tripled our GDP. Every citizen could have an average income of $333,000 instead of $53,000, a $277,000 increase in the average income. This doesn't even factor in the cost of compliance, rent seeking, and state-level regulations. We could have had so much more prosperity and so much less poverty without state regulations on our economy. So how can you look your opponents in the eye and claim that your regulations are somehow for the common man?
The word to focus is could. Without government, I would say that we would measure all money by pretty much seashells and bartering systems. I mean, come on. You're telling me that it would be $40 trillion that would mostly go up to the richest 1%. And with inflation, it would probably be like bread to be $300. I'm pretty sure, I don't know where you got these numbers from, but you probably ripped it out of your wazoo. But I'm gonna stop it right here. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and overall have a blessed